Welcome everybody. I'm David Heathfield. I'm in England. I'm not in Africa at the moment, although I feel I'm with you. And I'm going to tell you a story. And I don't know where this story comes from, but the person who told it to me said, perhaps this story comes from Africa. If you know this story, please write in the chat. I want to know where this story comes from. I'll say story, and wherever you are in the world, please answer. I'll say story, you say tell us a story. It doesn't matter if I can't hear you because we're sending this energy, so we're together. So let's try story.
Tell us a story.
Yes. There was a parent, and this parent had wealth. And this parent said to their 3 offspring, soon I will pass on from this world. One of you 3 will have everything that is mine. Whichever one of you can build the greatest house will have everything. Well, the eldest of the offspring went and purchased some stone and started building a stone house. No house can be greater than a house made of stone. They employed masons to help. The second of the offspring went to the timber yard and got wood, the finest timber, the highest quality, and with carpenters began to build a huge house made of wood. But the youngest did something else. The youngest went into the community, went into a house in that village. And there, the youngest began to tell stories. And the people in that house, they listened and they enjoyed the stories. And after the youngest had told their stories, they began to share stories as well. And people came into the house from other houses in that community. And then that youngest went into another house and started telling stories there, until soon the whole of the village was sharing stories. It was like a festival, like a party. Everybody was sharing. There was music and there was dancing and there were stories. And when the whole village was telling stories, the youngest went to another village in that land and started the same thing, telling stories in one house, in other houses. Across the land, people were sharing stories. Well, finally, the youngest came back and the older 2 had completed their houses. And the parent said, let's see which of you will inherit everything. And the oldest 2 said, one of us surely, because the younger one hasn't built a house. But the parent looked, that's a fine house made of stone. And this house made of wood, it's an admirable structure. But you, my youngest, every house in every village in the land has its doors open to you. You have opened all of the doors and you are welcome everywhere because of your stories. There is no limit to your house. Yours is the greatest house and you will have everything. And the youngest laughed. You know, I love telling stories. I don't need anything else. Everything that you give me is for sharing. A simple story to start today's meeting. Or is it a meeting or is it a festival? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you so much. And welcome everybody to this special event that we've organized today for you on storytelling in the classroom, storytelling for engagement with young people. There is a really interesting story behind the event we are organizing today, this webinar. And I've been so looking forward to this that I was so eager, excited about being here today that last Tuesday, I was actually at the beginning of this webinar and then I dozed off and then I slept and slept and slept, and then got up at midnight. And at midnight, everyone, hundreds of people who had joined this webinar had disappeared. There were only 3 people in the webinar room, and they were all leaving the room. I was so ashamed of myself. How can you be the moderator of an event like this one, and then you doze off and sleep at the beginning of the webinar? I was so ashamed that I decided to leave the room in shame. And I could hear people speaking. All of a sudden, it was no longer a webinar. It was actually some room, and people were leaving the room and going back home all excited. And I could hear Geraldine's voice talking to some children. So I decided to move on the other direction, the opposite direction from where her voice was coming, because I was so ashamed to meet her, because I didn't know how to explain that the moderator of a webinar had suddenly fallen asleep and only woken up when the webinar was over. So I moved towards the other side, and it came very close to an old building, really dilapidated building. And I thought, oh, nobody would come this way. So I walked around the corner to the other side of the road. And then up the hill, I could see Mwanaidi and Rashidat with a group of ladies walking towards me. And as I tried to cross the road, I noticed that they were coming so close they would see me. So I turned to the left, saw this at this old building, there was an old broken door. So I said, well, there must be no one in here. I'll just get in there and hide until the ladies come and pass by. And behold, when I opened this door, there was David telling stories to some young kids. And directly behind him was a bar. And Sikumbuze was there with Jacques drinking a beer. And I stood there so frustrated, disappointed, and ashamed to have been this webinar moderator who disappeared at the beginning of the webinar. Someone told us today that listening to stories is almost the same as dreaming. It's so hard to tell the difference. I don't know if I was telling you a dream or a story, but I'll take David Hitfield's words that listening to stories is almost the same as dreaming, because it's so hard to distinguish between the two. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. And thank you, David, for opening this, because Africa ELTA needs to celebrate the work that you have been doing behind the scenes with our teachers who have joined the Creativity in English, sorry, I'm going to miss that one, the CREST course, because I've called it the CREST course. And so this is one of the many projects that Africa ELTA has been running, apart from our female mentoring project and the research, the classroom, the teacher research project, and also our open educational resources. David so graciously offered to support us by training African teachers, offering places every time he's got a course going on to African teachers to join his creative. David, can you just help me now? I didn't write that down. Creativity.
The course is, oh, I'll just
great.
Here we are, Africa, but I'll put this away so we can see now. It's, oh, that's the wrong one. I'm using the wrong one.
It's
here
creative,
we are, here we go.
Creative and engaging storytelling for teachers.
Creative and engaging storytelling for teachers, CREST.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
And I've been running the course since the pandemic. So since summer of 2020, I started running these online Zoom courses about storytelling for teachers, and was always offering a couple of places to teachers that couldn't afford to join the courses for whatever reason. And then the last 5 courses, and this is the 6th course that's going on now, there's been a member of Africa ELT joining, and it's been fantastic. I mean, absolutely wonderful to bring that wealth of experience from Africa, because the participants on the course are literally coming from all around the world, from Asia, the Americas, all over Europe. And to have African participants is incredibly important for me and for everybody.
Great, thank you very much. One of the things you've done, and probably you don't know this until we tell you, is that Africa is full of stories, and our teachers are full of stories. And many of our teachers use these stories in the classroom in different ways. But what you've done is to work with, I think now 6 teachers. We've actually got the 6th teacher who's benefited. And these courses cost a lot of money. It's £144.
Oh, it's actually gone up.
Oh, okay. So at least, yeah, it's nearly £200, I would say.
£175 it is.
£175. And our teachers, 5 already have completed. And there's one from from Angola now. So we've got teachers from Nigeria, Rashidat, from Tanzania, Mwanaide, from South Africa, Sikumbozo, from Benin, Jacques Dosa, and from Kenya, Geraldine, the incredible Geraldine, who went ahead to do the second part of the course and has also been doing a lot more work with her kids. And I know Rashida too has been her kids have been engaged in a global storytelling event that happens on Tuesdays. Is it once a month or once a week?
It's every Tuesday.
It's every Tuesday. So David, there would be space for you to talk about that as well, because I think it's important that our teachers and who are themselves parents and our kids join this global community of children listening to and engaging with stories from different cultures, because the world needs to hear their own stories and they need to hear stories from the world as well. It's a starting point for intercultural awareness, even for young people. So thank you so much, David. But I just wanted to ask a question about our 6 African participants. Is there anything that stands out for you with these participants?
Well, all people that come on the courses have come with stories, personal stories, but also stories from their own cultures. But what is particularly striking about teachers who've participated from Africa is how closely connected you are to the stories that you tell. You have a sense of being closely connected to oral literacy. And that's something in Europe, certainly in the UK, often doesn't happen. I didn't really learn stories when I was growing up from listening to them from elders in my community. I learned from books, but there's been a kind of regeneration, a resurgence of storytelling in the UK and many parts of the world. There was a kind of break, but I think in many parts of Africa, there's been more of a continuation. And it's really important to maintain this ancient form of passing on learning and joy through the traditional stories. They carry a lot of wisdom.
Yeah, great. So, well, this evening would mainly be stories, but we would start this, and there would be opportunities for the people in the audience. If you've got a story from your culture and that you wanted to share, there would be an opportunity for you to do that. We would be letting you know when you can, when and how you can indicate, and then we would bring you in as a panelist so that you can tell your story and other people can listen to you. But I wanted us to kickstart this event by listening to the incredible Rashidat from Nigeria, who's done fantastic work before she joined the CREST course, and even after she's been through the CREST course. She does a lot of advocacy work across Nigeria with young people. And also she's been phenomenal in the way she's supported professional development within Africa ELTA itself and within her local community in Nigeria. So Rashidat would be starting up with our first presentation for this evening.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks, Despina. I can see you supporting us in the chat. Thank you very much. All right. So my presentation this evening is teaching English grammar using stories. Now, I was so excited after I finished the CREST. And when we finished the CREST, or towards the end of the CREST, we're all supposed to come up with a project. And I just decided that I was going to try to use stories to teach grammar. And I didn't know how I was going to do it initially, but I knew that a lot of us find grammar very daunting and difficult, and stories are able to just bring everything to life. So I had discussions with David and I tried some things out. And today I'd like to share some of the things that I found out and some of the practices that I use. All right, so in this session, we're going to be looking at why it's important to use stories in the classroom and how you can plan your lessons so that you can have a grammar focus while still using stories. I'm going to talk about some of the good ways to deliver the stories to make them quite effective. And of course, it's all about the learners, so we have to have learner activities. And towards the end, I'll be sharing a video that just runs through a sample lesson of mine using stories to teach grammar. Okay, so there are so many benefits of using stories, but these are some I think are particularly related to grammar lessons. So I did mention the fact that a lot of us find grammar really daunting and so full of rules. So stories bring the class to life, make it less boring, make your class more engaging. And then whenever you're telling stories, the language you're using is authentic, it's real. The children or the learners or the listeners can listen and actually understand what you're saying. And the content, of course, is often relatable. Today, our focus is on folk tales, and this is even more relatable to the African learner or to a learner that is not a first language learner. You know, they understand the context of the story. They may have come across the story before. They're able to relate to the story and then more to the structure and the grammar in the story. Now, when you're telling stories, you focus on the proper usage of your grammar and less on the rules. Yes, you will probably be bringing out the rules, but that is not so much the focus. So that concept of fear isn't really there. And another interesting thing about using stories to teach is that even if you are not going to focus on grammar, you find that the repeated exposure to different chunks of language, to different structures in context, in a story, get the listeners, get the learners used to these structures, even without it being pointed out. So a lot of times, if I'm using stories, I use a lot of adverbials. I use a lot of words, and learners and listeners pick up collocations that you can later on, you know, highlight after the story. But because you're saying all of this in a story form, they're almost speaking it as if they're picking a first language. It's coming really naturally. Another wonderful thing about using stories is that it improves the imagination. It improves visualization. It enhances creativity and critical thinking. And all of these are important life skills generally and essential skills in English language. I mean, if you're talking about your productive skills, once you're able to imagine, once you're able to be creative and think critically, then your speaking skills and your writing skills are going to improve exponentially. And of course, it does build your listening and speaking skills. All right, thank you, Harry. So this is a picture of me telling stories in a session. And I just love this picture because it shows you how engaged the learners are. I mean, you can see them just staring at my mouth. Everybody was just focused on me, trying to pick the lesson or the words from the story. And the beautiful thing about stories is that it's not just your words, it's your expressions, it's your actions. We're going to look at a bit of that further on. Next, please. All right, so when I want to plan a lesson using stories, the first thing that is important to do is try to choose your story or craft your story based on the objective that you want to achieve with the learner. So what is the grammar objective? If I want to plan a lesson that focuses on verbs, I have some stories that I can use. I would look for stories that have a lot of action in them or that they can mime. If I want to plan a story that is focusing on exclamations or onomatopoeia, I'll look for a story with a lot of action. So sometimes I can't find a story in my repertoire that I particularly need, so I craft a story. I remember once I wanted to teach preposition, and I think that's the story we're going to look at in my sample today. I crafted a story about a boy who lost something and he was looking for it, and I had the opportunity to impute a lot of prepositions in that story. He looked on, he looked under, he looked inside, all of that. So you can craft your own story, you can adapt a story, but of course your grammar focus or your lesson focus would help you to decide which story you want to use. Now, the level of the learners or the age of the learners will also determine what type of story you use or the kind of vocabulary you use. So sometimes you can actually use the same story for two different levels of learners, an intermediate and an advanced or a beginner, but then you have to try to modify your words to suit the level. You also have to consider the duration of time that you have available. If you don't have so much time, you may have to go for a shorter story. And if you have the whole day for storytelling, you can use a longer story, or your activities can then more incorporate the storytelling with the children. Another thing you need to decide to do is whether you want to start the lesson with the story, or you want to introduce the grammar concept first and then tell the story. Next, please. Right. So when you've decided all of this, you also have to think of the things that you need physically in the classroom. You don't have to get props and costumes for you to tell a beautiful story, because storytelling is all about imagination. But sometimes access to props and costumes and musical instruments can bring the story to life. And a lot of times these are things that you can get from your house, from your school already, or from the learners. So try to plan ahead for whatever it is you need and get them ready before time, practice with it before time. This is a picture of me using an African seed pod as a makeshift musical instrument. So this is something I can find in my environment easily. And sometimes you can even create your instruments. You can have your children create an instrument, whatever you can do just to bring more activity and inclusion into the lesson. Time and time management is essential, especially when you're telling a story, because if you're not careful, you're going to get carried away. The children are going to get carried away, and you will not have enough time for everything you want to do in your lesson. Another important step is that you should practice before the lesson. And sometimes, especially if it's a new story, have a story map or a story skeleton handy just by your side in case you need to really glance and, oh, I forgot what goes next in the story. You can just have a quick glance and then you continue with your story. The very next step is preparing a lesson plan. It's important that your lesson, even though you are the one telling the story, can I have the next slide, please? Even though you're the one telling the story, it's important that your lesson focuses on the learners. Always have a student-centric lesson. Always have activities and opportunities where the learners can be involved either with the storytelling or in a lot of activities after the storytelling. So the next slide, I have a sample lesson plan. And we all have different templates you use for our lesson plans, but it's important that you plan your lesson, because sometimes you just feel, oh, I'm going to tell a story today, and you go in and tell the story. And that works because I use stories now frequently, sometimes just as a warmer for the class. But if I want to use my story as a basis for a grammar lesson, then I really do need to plan ahead. So I just have the basic parts of a plan. I have the title, the objectives, whatever materials I'm going to use. And then I outline the activities that we're going to do. And yes, the time allocation, I try to follow that closely. I also create worksheets where I can, create activities where I can. And sometimes I use other worksheets and other activities. So it's not necessary that you always have to create your own worksheets, but of course you will reference them. Yes, of course you will reference them in your lesson plan. Next, please. Okay, so now I just want to talk about some of the things that David has taught us and that I found that is very important when you're delivering a story. Make sure that all the learners can actually see you. So sometimes you may decide to create a circular or semicircular sitting pattern. Just make sure that everybody can see you so that they all get the best benefits. The beauty of storytelling over reading from a book, because I'm also a very big proponent of read alouds and reading. And my work before I joined Crest was really focused on reading, and the benefits of read alouds and the benefits of stories. But I find that when you read or when you tell a story, it's more personal, more up close. The learners can actually feel you. They can look into your eyes. You can share your expressions with them, as opposed to when you're holding a book that is covering your face, or you have to peer around to see how the learners are reacting to you. So it's important you're visible. They can see your gestures. They can see your facial expressions. Another important thing is that you should be loud and enough and use a clear voice. Now, as teachers, I think many of us already have that teacher voice clearly going on, but it's more important that you're clear when you're telling a story. Personally, I know that I speak quite fast. So when I'm telling a story, I purposely try to slow myself down. I get myself in a sort of performance mode so that I'm stressing the words more. The learners can pick the pronunciation better. That is the importance of clarity when you're telling a story. And of course, I've been talking about gestures and facial expressions. They're very, very important. They're the things that actually build imagination for us. Because yes, our voice, tone, and pitch carry a lot, but the expressions in your face, the look of surprise, look of sorrow, can also bring that story to life for anyone that is listening. For some learners, you will have to pre-teach the vocabulary that you're going to use, especially if they're not used to the story or the level that you're teaching at. And this just helps them to be able to follow your story better. Then the best part of stories in learning English is the aspect of repetition. So we need to try to incorporate repetition as much as possible in our stories. That is how the learners are going to pick the language structure. They're going to pick those chunks that they will be finding useful in time as they speak English. Another important thing that helps for learners to remember a story or help to make a story more memorable is the use of rhyme and rhythm. So a lot of African stories I know already have songs, some of them have rhythm, but the way you as a teacher pronounce the words, the way you emphasize the words, the way you put your tone and give it rhythm will also make the children remember the story better and be able to retell and be able to go home and share the story. So although, at home they may not speak English, but because you've told a beautiful story in English that they want to share with their friends, they want to share with their siblings, they're going to be repeating your story and they're going to be using those words that they remember from the story. So the more you're able to repeat, the more you're able to use a rhythmic language, the more they will remember. And of course, very, very important, involve the learners, ask for predictions. So that's something David does all the time when we're in the class. If we're telling a story, he would pause at a very important and interesting point in the story and say, what do you think is going to happen next? And of course, this gets us all thinking. This gets our creative juices flowing, and it allows us to speak. It allows the learners to practice. And the storytelling situation is a situation of fun, of connection. So there isn't that fear of it's going to be a wrong answer. I'm going to make a mistake. And because it's a prediction, nothing is wrong. Anything they say could be possible. It's a story. And of course, you're going to involve movement, mime, chants, all of this. Once you are involving the learners in this, it's helping them feel that they're part of the story, and it's making the story more memorable. It's giving them more senses to use so that they can recall the language at a later time. Another interesting and important thing that I try to do, and I think is important if we can, is to record ourselves or record yourself when you're telling the story, because it's going to be necessary for the learners to listen to the story more than once, especially if you're using it to teach grammar. So the first listening is likely for them to just understand the plot of the story, to follow the story. Then the second listening will probably then focus on them identifying the grammar points that you want to bring home. So if you are able to record yourself, even if it's with your smartphone and then play it back later, or just an audio device that you can play it back later, then they can use this to, get the aspects you want to get. I'm getting some beautiful discussion in the chat. Yes, flashcards are interesting and very good to use. Thanks, Despina. I'm enjoying all the contributions. Yes, can we have the next slide, please? All right, so we said over and over and over again, learning should be learner-centered. What are the activities that you can give your learners after you've told your story, after you're done, or while you're planning your lessons? What are the things you need to think about? So a beautiful activity that works very well, even if you don't have any big lesson plan, is retelling the story. So when you tell the story, you can have your learners retell the story. And there are lots of ways you can do this. If you have a large class, you may not be able to have every learner come to the front of the class to retell the story. So you can pair them up, or you can have them in groups and have one person tell half of the story and the other person tell the other half, or they just share, one person tells first and then the other person tells the next time. Another interesting thing you can do is role play. So they get to act out, not necessarily the entire story, but a particular aspect of the story. You can also have discussions around the story. What did they like about the story? What didn't they like? Would they change the ending? What if the character had, what if the story was told from a different character's point of view? There's so much we can bring out as English teachers just around having our learners practice speaking after telling a story. Now, when we're talking about the grammar points, now you can have them listen to the story again and guide them to discover a rule. Guide them to listen to, maybe if you're talking about past tense, guide them to listen to the fact that, okay, when things are said in the past, there's a particular way the verb changes. Can they notice a pattern? Some of them will notice a pattern that, okay, most of the words end in ed. Some of them will not, but you're just helping them to focus more on the language, to try to bring it out, and you're leading them and you're steering them towards what they're supposed to discover. And there are many ways you can do this with different grammar points. Another interesting thing you can do to have them, after they've gotten the rule or the grammar point you want them to get, is practice using it, practice working with it, practice recognizing it. So a lot of this can be done with games and worksheets. There are online games, there are physical games. We can create our own games. You know, you can use charades, you can use, there's so much. Yes, someone says that an easel works well when presenting your story. Yes, because you can actually map out things, or you can have the learners draw. I mean, that's my last point, but I believe a lot in creativity and art in the language classroom, because it allows people that are gifted in different ways to also explore their own gifts. Not all of us are really gifted with speech or with speaking, but once we can draw on our gifts of art by drawing or craft, then you find us willing to speak about the art, willing to engage more. Then of course there's freer practice in the grammar aspects. You can have sentence transformation, creating and telling their own stories, recreating stories. There's so many activities you can do. In some of my classes, I get to class, I didn't even plan any story. The children will say, Ma, can I tell a story today? Because some days I tell stories, some days I tell the children to tell stories, just as an introduction to the class, and they find it really engaging and really interesting. So that is the end of the presentation. I do have a video that I said I was going to go through, the sample lesson. I'm not sure, Harry, is that available to share?
Yes, it is. I'll do that now.
Okay, so thank you very much for listening. I'll just go off screen for a while for Harry to share that. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Rashida Sadiq, and I'd like to Hi everyone, my name is Rashida Sadiq, and I'd like to have a run through of one of my lessons in which I use stories to teach grammar. The first thing I did in this lesson was to tell the story. But then he looked and looked and looked for the computer game. He couldn't find it.
He looked on his table, he couldn't find it. He looked under his bed, he couldn't find it. He looked in his drawers and in his wardrobe and he couldn't find it. He started getting upset. He looked behind the bedroom door, he still couldn't find it. He looked above the shelf, he still couldn't find it. Oh no, where is my computer game? So he decided to ask his mother, Mom, can you tell me where my computer game is? Have you seen it? His mom said, check in front of the television. I think I saw it there. So he went to check in front of the television and he still didn't see it there.
The next thing I do is to discuss the story when we're done.
Fauzi, I can see your hand up. Do you have it?
Yes, Mom.
Yes, what is your question?
I want to the meaning. What is the meaning of fence?
Fence, okay. So if you have a house, the wall between two houses or the wall around the house, it's called a fence. Own question. What did you like about the story? Please type it in the chat. If you had anything you liked about the story, type it in the chat. And if you have anything you didn't like about the story, type it in the chat. I'm waiting.
After discussing the story, then I shared a slide with them talking about the different kinds of prepositions. It was the main topic for the day.
Instead of, in the middle of, by the side. Okay, so we're going to see many words that are prepositions. Those are the two main types. So here are some examples. On, through, behind, for, beneath, against. So there's so many.
After discussing the topic and presenting the slide, then we started with the activities. The first activity was an online game. I use an online game, but sometimes if I don't have access to the computer, I'll create games with cardboard or paper that you can play in the classroom.
All right, awesome.
Yes.
So if I call your name, I would like you to please tell me which of the words in the sentence is the preposition. So I'll start with Muhibba. Muhibba, which word is the preposition in this sentence? The dog walked alongside the family.
I think it's alongside.
All right, I think so too. Let's try.
Out of this world.
Yes, Muhibba was correct. Okay.
The last activity of the day was to practice with a worksheet.
One for us. So can you tell us what the answer to the next one is? If you know the answer, please raise your hand. If you'd like to answer, please raise your hand. Dash my dog. Okay, Sadiq, yes. Sadiq, please unmute.
With.
Sorry, it does look like we haven't had parts of the video, so I would get that on in a moment, please. Just bear with me.
Hi everyone, my name is Rashida.
While Harry is doing that, I'm just going to share in the chat the link to the World Storytelling Cafe, but there are many events. And every Tuesday, we have young international storytellers. And Rashidat's own son, daughters regularly come and share stories, don't they, Rashidat? And are fantastic young storytellers. And it would be wonderful to welcome more young storytellers from Africa and all around the world to come on Tuesdays and join us.
My name is Rashid.
Yeah.
I've just put that in the link while we're waiting for the technical matter to be sorted out.
That's Sadiq, and I'd like to
Look this side. Okay, so we're going to see many words that are prepositions. Those are the two main types. So here are some examples. On, through, behind, for, beneath, against. So there are so many.
After discussing the topic and presenting the slide, then we started with the activities. The first activity was an online game. I use an online game, but sometimes if I don't have access to the computer, I'll create games with cardboard or paper that you can play in the classroom.
All right, awesome. Yes. So if I call your name, I would like you to please tell me which of the words in the sentence is the preposition. So I'll start with Muhibba. Muhibba, which word is the preposition in this sentence? The dog walked alongside the family.
I think it's alongside.
All right, I think so too. Let's try.
Out of this world.
Yes, Muhibba was correct. Okay.
The last activity of the day was to practice with a worksheet.
One for us. So can you tell us what the answer to the next one is? If you know the answer, please raise your hand. If you'd like to answer, please raise your hand. Dash my dog. Okay, Sadiq, yes? Sadiq, please unmute.
With.
Yes, with. So the answer to this one is with. All right. So the next one says, we never go dash the park, dash my dog. So Fauzia and okay, Fauzia first. For the next one, we never go dash the park. Fauzia?
We never go near the park.
Okay, let's try near. There's another possible option, but near is not bad.
No, we never go to the park.
I think 2 is better. We never go
to the park.
Right. Muhiba, the next one, dash my dog. We never go to the park, dash my dog.
Without.
Again?
Without.
Correct.
Without.
Thank you. Without my dog. We never go to the park without my dog. He would be upset if we left him dash home. Who can answer that for me? I want someone that hasn't spoken already. Aisha Jao. Yes, please. Aisha Jao. He would be upset if we left home. Good. At home.
At home.
At home, yes. At home. Okay, well done. Okay, so now we need to move on with our story.
And after the class, I asked them to try to create their own stories using preposition.
Great. Welcome back, and thank you very much, Rashidat, for what I would call now the keynote presentation for this evening. We will give there's some fantastic comments here, but if anyone's got a question, please, if you could just type your questions here. I know Rashidat has been looking at the chat box. What an engaging speaker she is, to be able to do a very wonderful presentation the way she does it and still be able to look at the chat box. That's a skill that very few people have, and which I certainly don't have. So you would find a question and answer section in the chat box. No, not in the chat box, please. The Q&A. If you have a question, please, can you just type your question there? But I'll also be monitoring the chat box in case you want to ask a question. Or if you've got, yeah, it's full of praise, Rashida. Powerful presentation. Thanks for the amazing and wonderful presentation. If you were wondering if you wanted Rashidat's lesson plan, the one that was shared here. Don't worry, she has shared the lesson plan with Africa ELTA, and this is going to appear soon on our open educational resources section, and you can use them and acknowledge them appropriately for free. Any questions? Right, we've got a question from Alan Hall. It says, when you give the students free practice and opened it up for many types of skills, interests like art, storytelling, etc., what sort of things did the students come up with? If you unmute yourself, Rashida, you can answer.
Okay. Yes. So a lot of the times when I give the opportunity for freer practice, I still sometimes restrict it. So I may say, make a drawing. I may say, choose an aspect of the play and reenact it. But the children always come up with very, very interesting things, even more than what I anticipated. Or if I give a craft, and sometimes I'm even very specific, if there's a basket in our story, I could give them pieces of paper and tell them to create a paper basket. But every single time, the learners will create a different basket from what I had given as a sample or what I had envisaged. So it always does bring out their creativity. And another interesting thing I find, this happens actually a lot after the lesson or after the class, is that then they take those pieces and they start to act different things. They start to play in different ways with whatever it is they've created. But within the classroom, it's still sort of relatively regulated. But after class, I look at them and I see them explore even beyond what I've asked them to do. I hope that sort of answers the question, Alan.
So there is another one here. Do you have examples of stories that can be used in the classroom? If so, please share. Well, I would answer this. Yes, there are lots of African stories available. Hang on to this webinar. There will be stories that you can listen to, and this is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube, Africa ELTA YouTube channel, and also on the Africa ELTA Facebook page, which we would encourage you to subscribe to. Other comments in the chat box from Husseini Hassan. Thank you very much, Rashidat. Before now, I never knew telling stories can be used for another purpose apart from motivation. And this is a very interesting comment, because we African teachers have lots of stories. I grew up around the fireside in the moonlight, listening to stories from grandma and grandpa, and the lots of stories we all grew up listening to, and teachers have these stories. But what many teachers haven't done is transform these stories into powerful tools, pedagogic tools in the classroom, and Rashida just demonstrated how we could do that. And again, I think David's contribution to our work is to get our teachers to draw from that rich culture of storytelling and think more creatively about how that applies to their job as language teachers. Fantastic support we've got from David so far. Now we are going to come back to questions and answers.
There's a story in the chat about Anansi.
So, yeah.
You want to answer that, Harry?
Sorry. In the chat, Anansi, I am sorry, what does Anansi mean?
Okay, so there's a, yes, someone suggested,
So did anyone use Anansi here? I know that Anansi is the name of a character.
Someone suggested Anansi stories.
Oh, Anansi stories.
Yes, yes. Someone suggested Anansi stories. So Anansi is a spider in West African culture. If you Google it, you see a lot of stories come up. There are a lot of characters like that all over Africa. In Nigeria, we have the clever or cunning tortoise.
Yeah.
Anansi is also a cunning spider.
Yeah, Anansi's, I think in different cultures have different names for the same kind of character, and they also have different animals. So in Agem, for example, we use Wandong and Wafumoa. So Wandong is a clever person, and sometimes we can use Wandong to be an animal, or sometimes it's a person. But in the Bulu culture, for example, they use Kulu, which is more of an animal. So Anansi represents, it could be the spider, it could be the tortoise, it could be, what's the other animal? A deer. So yeah, so there are different names that are used. And if you look at African story books, for example, if you Google African story books, there are lots of stories there. Now, these stories are already written, but what we are highlighting here is not just stories that children read, but actually telling them those stories, because when you tell stories, it's beyond the text. It also includes your body language. And one of our other speakers, Geraldine, would be talking about that. She's a fantastic storyteller. And what strikes me with her, with the way she carries herself is her body language when she tells a story. We're very, very lucky that Geraldine has joined us now. She's had serious technical problems. We will give her some time to settle down, and we would, in the meantime, we would listen to a few more stories, if you don't mind. So just give me a minute to play up the technology, to get through the technology. This next story comes from South Africa, and that's from our friend Siku Mbuzo. And the reason why we are playing this is because of technical problems down in South Africa, electricity issues. He's not able to tell his story live. So bear with me, I'll bring that up in a moment.
Story, Tosi. Story. Once upon a time, in the vast land of Velanganda, the creator, lived a chameleon. The chameleon was Velanganda, the creator's trusted messenger. One day, as Velanganda, the creator, looked at the vast land, he saw those that he created in his image, the human beings. He saw their skins were wrinkling as they got older and older. He did not like this, because they were no longer looking like him, but they'll be uglier and uglier and uglier. Then Vilanganda thought, oh, great chameleon, let me give you this oil. Let me share this oil with you. You go and give the human beings, the ones that I created in my likeness. The chameleon quickly took the oil. As the chameleon was going, meandering through the forests of the vast land, he met a snake. And the snake says, ah, chameleon, where are you going? The chameleon said, as you know, I'm the trusted messenger of the king. I am delivering this oil to human beings. The snake said, oh, chameleon, come here. You'll get time to go. Just rest a bit and drink from this pool. Taste how sweet this water is. The chameleon went to the pool, tasted the waters. The water was so sweet and cold. The chameleon drank and drank and drank. The snake was watching. Then the snake said, oh, taste this honey too. It's much, much sweeter than the waters. The chameleon tasted the honey. He ate. He ate. As he was eating, the snake was adding more and more and more honey. As he was eating, the chameleon's tummy grew bigger and bigger and bigger until he had to sleep. He could no longer walk. As he was resting and could not move, the snake went to the chameleon and took the oil and ran into the bushes. What am I going to say to the Lord? Said the chameleon. Then he looked for the nearest tree and hid. Chameleon, chameleon, where are you? The great creator shouted. Chameleon, where are you? The chameleon did not know how to answer. The leaves of the tree were green. So in his fear, he turned green so that the Lord doesn't see him, so that Mvelanganda does not see him. I see you, chameleon, said Mvelanganda, the great creator. Chameleon jumped to the next tree. This tree was yellow and had blue flowers, so the chameleon turned yellow and blue, trying to hide from Mvelanganda. I see you, chameleon. Chameleon went down to the ground. The sand was brown. He tried to turn brown. I see you, chameleon. Then, in great shame, the chameleon went slowly towards the Lord, towards the Mvelanganda. When he arrived, Mvelanganda said, from this day on, you will have this walk of shame where you walk slowly and slowly. And that's why today the snake and its generation have the skin peeling off because they used that oil. Story ends. What is the value of the story? The moral of the story? We must do as we are told. If you are a messenger, you must be trusted. Be trusted to the people that trust you. Stores. End of story.
Thank you very much, Siku Muzo. That's NAETSA president. NAETSA is the National Association of English Teachers of South Africa. And he was also, I think he was the third of our members to benefit from the program. The next story comes with a question. We would love you to get a few minutes to relate that story, the next story, to your own real world and your teaching, and would like you to use the chat box to make as many comments as possible about how that story relates to your own life and your teaching. And that story comes from Tanzania. It's told to us by Mwanaije, who's here. Unfortunately, we can't see her because of network problems. That's very African. But she recorded her story, and it's here for us to watch. So just give me a minute to pull that up.
Place here in northern Tanzania, very far place here in northern Tanzania, the place called the Kilimanjaro, where the Chaga people dwell over there. Happened to be an old retired man living with his daughter. Legend has it that his wife died of witchcraft. Nobody knows exactly what really happened, but that's it. So the man, the daughter, they live for so long, very happy. And the man was very aware of education, importance of educating a girl child. And he spent his last dime to make sure that her daughter received a well education. She graduated with honors and she was employed somewhere. The girl, so fresh from university, have this huge dream from here Tanzania to England. Oh, not bad, but She was employed somewhere, I'll tell you later. Contrary to her expectations, the work was so hard, with a little here and there problems, hardship, sorrows, break up and downs, that. So she was constantly lamenting, reporting to the father, "Father, I don't want this job. I want to move. This is not for me. I want to look for more greener pasture somewhere else. This is not for me, blah, blah, blah. Dad here." So the father was very frustrated with all her daughter's nagging. So one day, she summoned her and said, "Daughter, this coming weekend we are going to talk. A very serious talk. Father and daughter." "Dad, okay, I'm all ears." Days passed and the weekend was there. Boom. During the evening, it was so cold, chilling somewhere outside their house. They started a small fire, and the father said, "Daughter, go inside there, bring me 3 eggs, 3 yams, and 1 spoonful of coffee fresh from our farm." "Dad, what's for?" "Baby, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Always listen more. Go and do as instructed." The daughter went ahead, brought all the ingredients. "Go inside there and bring me 3 pots, cooking pots. Put 1 pot eggs, another 4 yams, and another coffee, and distribute equal amount of water in the fire. Wait for 30 minutes and see the result. Patience is the key." "Dad, are you now a chemist or a laboratory technician or what?" Patience, my daughter, patience. So as they stayed there waiting for the effect of fire to those ingredients. The father had this favorite melody. He always sing as his work poetry whenever he was doing here and there work. Hum, hum, yeah, la, 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 hum, 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 Africa, hum, hum, yeah, la, 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 hum, hum, Africa. "Daughter, can you go and check the first dish and the second one and the last one? Please pour them on 3 different plates. Coffee on the mug, right?" "Okay, Dad." She went, she did as instructed. The father said, "Now taste the ingredient and tell me what really happened, the effect of fire on those ingredients before and after cooking." The daughter tasted the yams, tasted the eggs, and the coffee was so delicious. The father said, "My daughter, sometimes fire can be so hard, can be so harsh, can be so cruel, can be so painful, sorrowful. This represents all the hardship you encounter in your daily basis. But those challenges, if you choose to see them in a positive way, they're gonna make you a very strong woman. So what doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Yay! Yay!
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Thanks, Monaidi, for that story. There were problems with the sound. She worked really hard to get this story across. So we appreciate that we're able to play this story. She couldn't join us on video. She's here. She couldn't join us on video. If you've got any questions you want to ask her, she's still able to answer now live. If you put them in the questions or the chat box. She recorded the story and she couldn't even get it to us on WhatsApp. So because of network issues, so she split it into two parts and sent to us, and we were able, thanks to our tech expert, Abigail from Cameroon, to get the two parts of the story put together for you today. So please bear with us, the quality of the sound. It's gone through a lot of iterations, and that has meant that the quality of the sound was greatly diminished. So when I did, thank you so much for sharing a story from the bottom, from near Mount Kilimanjaro. Thank you very much. Just comments and different people saying what they have learned from the story, from your story, and from Sikumbuzo's story from South Africa. I don't think that there's any question at the moment. Can we now move then to our next presenter, Geraldine Nanjala?
Oh, I have a question for Moana.
Okay.
And Moana, I remember when you were doing the course that you said that you often teach teenagers. I think most of your students are teenagers, and we had lots of discussions about this. I want to ask you, what do you think is the most important thing or what's one important thing you think that teachers need to think about when they're selecting stories to tell with teenagers rather than children?
Okay, thank you very much, David. Okay, so one thing the teachers should bear in mind before telling or selecting a story for children or the teenagers, we should look on their needs. So I first select the learner's needs. So as I'm talking with them, I slowly try to gather what do they want? What are their aspirations? How do they see life? So sometimes I try to tell these stories to show them the reality through stories. So I kindly prepare them to solve problems in their daily basis. So the age is important, the aspiration is also most important. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a brilliant answer. I love it.
Thank you very much. So our next speaker is Geraldine Nanjala from Kenya. Geraldine is the only one of the 6 who went on to do the second stage of the course. And she and her children have continued to contribute to global storytelling since she joined this program. Geraldine is a senior teacher at Ndege Primary School in Kenya. She teaches English, Kiswahili, social studies, and arts. She's also a teacher librarian and an environment patron, I would say an environment champion. And she's chairperson of the Rift Valley Reading Association. She's done fantastic work with helping young people to read. And she's also, of course, a very proud member. She calls herself a proud member of Africa ELTA. So I would want to hand over to Geraldine now to share her pearls of wisdom with us. Geraldine, the floor is yours.
Hi. How are you, everyone? Good evening. My topic for discussion today is the role of stories in early minds. These early minds are those children that start getting to school. They start learning at the age of 3 as they go to the kindergarten and the age of, from that time onwards. So I teach the ones that are in grade 1, that is 6 years. Next slide. The question comes, What is child development? Child development is the process by which a child changes over time as the years go. It covers the whole period from conception up to an individual becoming an adult. So the whole process is child development. Next. So what does child development include? So it includes the cognitive, that is the ability to learn and to solve problems. So the child is able to recognize things and able to solve problems that he comes across. So it is a social interaction also, interacting with others and mastering self-control. So that child is able to control himself when he's interacting with others, when he's mingling with others, when he's playing with others. So he's able to control himself. This is the time where speech and language, that is understanding and using language, reading that language and communicating in that language. That is the time that child learns even the vocabulary. The vocabularies here mean the words in that particular language. It is physical skills, that is using the hands, that is fine motor, using the fingers, using the hands, touching things, feeling the things that the child comes across, and it is also gross motor. The gross motor, that is the whole body growing and the whole body having the skills, using of the legs, everything. It is the sensory awareness, that is the registration of sensory information and the use of the sensories that that child has, the feelings, the hearing, the smelling, all that is developed. Next. Next. What is then stages of child development? There are 3 stages of child development. That is early childhood, that is from birth to around 7 years or 8 years. That is the child has developed from that childhood up to the age of 8 years. That child has developed. And the middle childhood, that is now from age 8 up to age 12. At this time, this child has started going even to school. And then we have the adolescent. The adolescent, that is the 12 years to 18 years. Still, that is child development. Next slide. This is the pictorial view of how a child is developing. At home, the child is in that picture 1, and then a toddler. The child is developing at age 3. That picture 3, that is the time this child has started going to school. Still the next picture, that is the adolescent and the adult. So they keep on growing like that. And in that way, the child is developing in all ways, the mind and physical, emotional, and all sorts of development. Next. So Why age 6? The role of stories in early minds at the age of 6 years. This is the time the child has started now understanding what is good and what is bad. The child is able now to be guided by the teacher to know what is good. And through stories, this is when this child can be able now to learn better. So stories develop language and emotions. So as Rashida said, that stories develop the language. Through repetition, you repeat the stories, all the characters in the story, repeating the words in the story. Then the child is able to develop the language and master that language. The child is able also to grow emotionally. So in the stories, there could be characters that were annoyed. And how did they behave when they were annoyed? How did they solve the problem that made them annoyed? So the child is able now to understand. And at this stage, the teacher should guide the storyteller and the story receiver and guide the child. So the kind of stories that the teacher will tell the learner will matter so that you can guide the child to behave emotionally. It strengthens relationship between the storyteller and the child. So the way the storyteller will tell the story will be able to bond that storyteller and the child. So your body behavior, your body language, the way you tell the story should be able to bond you with the child. The child will learn vocabulary even faster because by repeating all the time, choose the words that you use in that story so that the child is able now to learn properly the vocabularies that you use. And by the time you end the story, the child will be repeating those words and he will learn the words faster. So the stories are also meant to entertain. So when the class is so boring, by just having those regular activities without stories, it will be boring to the child. So stories entertain children. Next slide. These are just some of the stories of books that the storyteller should choose. Stories with the pictures of animals, pictures of people, pictures of drums. Perhaps you are talking about singing, and the children. That is then the last picture there is of a child who is playing. Would be that story is supposed to be told, and through the website there, African Stories, you can get these stories from there. Choose the stories for grade 1. When you open the website, you will find that those stories are there for age 6. But I would like to mention here that as you go on telling the stories, you should also tell personal stories. Perhaps you could ask, what did you see as you are coming to school? So the child at age 6 will be able perhaps to express himself by only one sentence, but the teacher will guide the child to develop perhaps the story by asking questions. So in these stories, you can read the stories for the children and explain what is there. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide.
I've got a slide, yeah, with the kids. Carry on.
Okay. At age 6, these are the children who are in my neighborhood. In the first picture, I gathered those children and told them stories. I told them stories while they were just sitting on the grass, and they enjoy it. They even don't remember that they are down there. So I told the stories in the language that they understand better. I told them the stories in Kiswahili, and they were very much comfortable because there were children there with at age 3. And then the story was about Mr. Pembe and the guinea fowls. The next picture, they now imitated. They took themselves as the guinea fowls, and they were walking like the guinea fowls. So at this age, they enjoy such stories and they like imitating. So if they imitate that way and they sing, they will be able to remember that story. They will be able to remember the language that was used. They will even sing the song. And these children went home singing that song that I had taught them. With the guinea fowls of Mr. Pembe, the stupid woman slaughtered one of us. We got afraid and ran away. So they will grasp those words. They will sing, they will enjoy. And that is what they did on that day. The next slide. Next slide. Now, at age 12, this is an age that they have developed. At this age, when you tell the story, they will be able even to ask questions because they have developed anyway. Their minds have developed. They will be able to even discuss among themselves. It is a time big change happens to kids both emotionally and physically. So here, they can even relate themselves to the story. They can ask or they can doubt and ask a question. Is it possible? It is the time they can even tell their own stories by discussing the stories that have been told by the teacher. So to improve in their thinking and abilities, this is the time they have improved in their ability and thinking. This is the time to know more about history, to know more about what happened a long time ago, and even tell stories about, apart from folk tales, they can even tell stories about the people around them or the history of the country or any history, but they will enjoy. This is the time that the stories you tell should have values, because they are very cheeky at this time, because they have started knowing more to improve on their vocabularies. This is the time they can even have deeper vocabularies than when they were having at age 6. So to share their morals, to shape their morals. The stories that are told at this time, they are supposed to shape their morals because they can be very cheeky at this time. So in the next slide, The stories that are chosen by the teacher for reading should be stories about imaginative stories. They should be stories about their age, about parties, about going to places, about playing with each other. Remember that the time also they have started changing emotionally and physically. So they will be told the stories. The stories that the teacher chooses, they are also found in this website. But again, the teacher is able to tell them, should be able to tell them about personal stories. Share with them your own personal stories. You are also you can also remember how you used to behave that time and share with these children. Apart from reading for them, you can ask also questions so that they can tell their stories, what happened in the village, how they behaved. I use these stories especially on weekends, on Mondays, after they have gone on weekends. Then on Monday, I start my lesson by asking them to tell me what happened to them in the village during the weekend. And they will start enjoying by saying, me. I want to tell you about our neighbor. Our neighbor did this, did that. Our neighbor was very annoyed with the children that were playing and making his compound dirty. And so with you is just to guide them and let them express themselves so that you can have them now start writing those stories and developing the stories in their composition as they write, because they have the story themselves. Next slide. So, at this stage, just behind the latter one, at this stage, these stories should be told by the teacher and expressing themselves. So with me, I told them a story about Mangoto. Mangoto was a child who was very naughty, a child who was about 12 years old. And when I told this story, it is a story that I was told by my grandmother. I come from Bungoma in Western Kenya, and the environment there, the land there is in the equatorial region, and it is very bushy. We have valleys that do not have water, but we have seasonal rivers. So when it is dry, you can wade through, you can just go through because there are no bridges. When they have water, you will have to go around. So Mangoto was a boy, a very naughty boy. He lived with his grandmother, and the grandmother usually told him to help her in doing some work in the compound and in the shamba, because the people around in Bungoma are agriculturalists. So Mangoto could not listen. He went to play across the ridge, went to play with other children, and he stayed there until evening. He did not even remember to come back for lunch. So when he came back at night, around 7 when dark was falling, he came and just sat very dirty. He could not even wash himself. And the grandmother was annoyed. But when she softened, she told the grandchild, please, Mangoto, do not play until evening. Why don't you just help me with some work around here? Mangoto would not say anything. What he did, he just ate and went to sleep without even washing. So the following day, the grandmother asked Mangoto to help her, but Mangoto just hid himself and snaked. So when the grandmother called, Mangoto, where are you, Mangoto? Help me, Mangoto, Mangoto. There was nobody. So what happened is that when he came back that day, the grandmother told him not to come at night anymore because it is said that there is an Ogi that lives near in the forest. So Mangoto could not hear that. So one day, when Mangoto came back from playing, he found it had rained somewhere and the valley had water. So there was a woman standing by there and asked Mangoto, please, can you help me? Please help me so that I can go across. I cannot because I fear the water. So Mangoto said, then jump on me. Mangoto jumped on, the old lady jumped on Mangoto's back and they went across. On reaching across, Mangoto told the woman, get off my back. The woman said, I'm not going. I'm not getting off your back. And he said, please, please, get off. The old lady said, no, I cannot. So she held him by the neck and even the legs tightened. Mangoto was not able to say anything. He went on crying, oh, please, I'm getting tired. You are too heavy for me, please. The old lady said, I will not get off. So Mangoto decided to go home and just stood by the door. When the grandmother opened, she was surprised to see Mangoto carrying an old woman. The lady did not say anything. Grandmother did not say anything. So Mangoto was just crying and the old lady said, you see, this is what I told you. Never play. So see what you have brought home. The old lady was just there. So the grandmother brought food. And when Mangoto was eating, the old lady was also extending her hand to eat while holding the neck very tightly so that she doesn't fall. Mangoto was crying and crying, oh, please, oh, please. Grandmother did not say anything. She could not call for help because that time the houses were very, very far. So they slept. Mangoto went to sleep and the lady was also there with her or with him. In the morning, the old lady, the grandmother, called for help. And the villagers came with all the weapons. They hit the lady, they hit the old woman, they hit the old woman until she fell off. That is the time Mangoto was relieved. And he sat down there, very tired, very sad. And the old woman was beaten until she died. So they told Mangoto, you see, this is the woman that has been terrorizing the whole village. This is an Ogi. From that time on, Mangoto did not dare leave that village. From that time, the grandmother was very happy because Mangoto was very helpful in the compound. So such stories can even change the behavior of naughty children. So yesterday, I told that story to the children, and they had all the imaginations. So I need to be seen. I had a lot of pictures.
Hold it close to the camera, Geraldine.
Hold it to the camera, near your camera instead.
Lift it a bit higher.
If you lift
okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So the boy drew the Mangoto and the old woman by the river. They also drew this one, Mangoto, very sad, carrying the old woman. This is age 12. That is Mangoto now eating, and the old lady is also eating. This is the picture of now the old lady beaten to death by the villagers. So you see, the children of that age 12, can imagine and draw for themselves. Very little guidance is needed here because they even have very, very beautiful pictures. So when you tell personal stories, and when you tell stories that you were told by your parents, by your grandmother, by your brother, by anybody who tells you a story, tell it to the children. It becomes even original. It is an original. So this one, these pictures here are original pictures now of that story because I've not seen it anywhere. In conclusion, I would like to tell the teachers to use stories in their classes. You have the stories. The children have the stories themselves. When you use these stories, you develop their mind, the power of imagination. They will imagine and come up with very, very good pictures that you'd never imagine. Because each child, these pictures were drawn by 2 children. So you can see that they have different drawings. This one here was drawn by a different boy, and this one was drawn by a different boy. So you can see that as you tell them to draw, they are imagining. They are imagining, and they are also deciding if they were the one, what would they have done? So stories are very powerful. Stories are even the basis of drama, basis of music, basis of art, because this is art. So my fellow teachers, use stories in your classes, use stories in your subjects, and then the children will even enjoy the lesson, and they will always be calling you, come, come, come. It is time for you to come and tell us a story. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Geraldine. Thank you. Naughty Mangoto, I hope that he learned his lesson. But I don't know about you, I was listening to Geraldine and I was watching her very closely. I called her the queen of body language in storytelling in Africa. And this comment from my colleague, Martin Weddell, captures it very well. Her body, her voice, her gestures, what a real storyteller. Thank you, Geraldine. We are happy that technology let you in when we had given all hope, and that it worked so well when you were giving your presentation. Thank you. We don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, for questions, so we would keep questions to the end. So just hang on, Geraldine. There would be a short panel discussion where we would be telling stories. I just want to move on to some of the other stories we already have queued up, and I'll start with this one.
Hello everyone, my name is Jakem Dosa. I'm from Benin, Savalu. My village is Lahotan. Once more, good evening to everyone. I'm happy to have you numerous watching me at this moment for this great job that is storytelling. Story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story. Hey, Cleo Maria, Cleo, Cleo, Cleo Maria, Cleo, oh Hovi, Cleo Maria, Cleo, Cleo, Cleo Maria, Cleo. So, ladies and gents, from wherever you are, hi again. Before anything, I would like to teach you some tools, successful tools that you are going to use in order to succeed in telling stories in your different classes or in your different communities. First of all, you have to proceed to warming up. Warm them up, make them feel at ease, ready to do the job or to listen to you or to be even interactive. The second one is catch words, or what can I say, catch songs. For example, the job I'm going to do now, I'm going to teach you a catchword and a catch song. The catchword is this. When I say story, story, you answer tell us story. Story, story, tell us story.
Tell us a story.
Tell us story.
Tell us a story.
And the catch song is a traditional song from my village that I try to shape into English. And the song is this. Story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story. Hey, Cleo Maria, Cleo, Cleo, Cleo Maria, Cleo, oh Hovi, Cleo Maria, Cleo, Cleo, Cleo Maria, Cleo. So when I say story okuo, you answer story, story, story okuo, story,
story.
For the first time. For the second time, when I say story, story okuo, you answer story, story, story okuo, story. Can we go? Story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story. So those are the catchwords and the catch songs. After that, I want you to proceed to listening and repeating. When you are telling the story, you have to give the floor to your audience, to your listeners, to your students, I mean, so that they repeat a sentence or a part of a sentence that you have just said. For example, I said, the sun and the moon were great friends. They were sincere friends. But the moon, but the sun is too greedy. And then I say, but the sun is too, so you answer greedy. You see, like that, it will make your audience be interactive. And the job, will be interactive, and it will help you to catch the attention of your listeners, of your students. After that, you have gestures. Yes, you are not a dead person. You have to practice with actions what you are doing or what you are saying. I mean, your story that you are telling. The next one is voice management. Yes, you have to manage your voice. Your voice should be managed. How? If you are performing a story that needs an old person to talk, you have to use your voice like an old person. If it is to weep, you have to weep. So you are a great actor. A storyteller is a great actor. And then the next one is quiz. After finishing telling your story, you have to put some question on your audience so that they answer you. Like that, you know that they have listened to you very carefully and your job is very, very well done. So, as we said, action are better than words. I'm going to tell you a story. The title of the story is The Origin of Eclipse of Sun or Moon. The origin of eclipse of sun and moon. Why there is eclipse of sun and moon? This is the story I'm going to tell you right now. Here is the moon and here is the sun. Ladies and gentlemen, story oku, story, story, story oku, story, story, story oku, story, story, story oku, story. Once upon a time, the sun and the moon were great friends, sincere friends. Each of them have had, a lot of children, but the sun is too greedy and wicked. You know, the sun came to the moon and told her, dear friend, I am fed up with my student. I'm very fed up with my children. They eat too much. And sometimes I even stay on an empty stomach. I'm not satisfied with my food. So I have come to you today, dear moon, so that we kill all our children. The moon got surprised. How can we kill our children for food? No, no, no. I won't accept. I cannot do that. But the sun tried his best to convince the moon to do that job against her will. And then on that day, they said they'll put all their children in a bag. Each of them will put their children in a bag, and they will go, to a river and throw each of them one by one into the river, and they will die. And they set the day. They set a day, and the son went back home. In the deep night, the moon thought, and said, no, I will not kill my children. I will not kill them. I'm going to trap the sun. The moon said, I'm going to trap the sun. I'll hide my children in a room, a dark room, and cover them there, and then fill my bag with shining stone like this. A stone that is shining, okay? A shining stone. Now, the D-Day has come. On the D-Day, they went to the river. The moon told the sun, you know, your children are too hot, so I cannot stay closer to you. I'll stay a bit far from you. But to make sure that you are throwing your children into the river, I will hear chia, because yours are hot. Okay, as they are hot, if you put them into the river, it will say chia. Mine, as they are not hot, they will say to be. And far from the sun, they started that good job. Inverted comma, good job. And then, they started. You will hear chia, to be, chia, to be, chia, chia, to be, chia, to be, chia, 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 to be, 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 until they empty the bag. In the deep night, after throwing their children into the river, they went back home. Now, in the deep night, the moon came out with all her children. The sun got angry and surprised and said, "What? What is that?" I'll go to the moon and strike. And went to the moon and asked her, "Why are children still alive?" And the moon smiled and said, "I am not so wicked and so greedy to kill my children for food." The sun got more angry and said, "You trapped me, you trapped me." Okay, and then slapped the moon. And the moon replied, "Pia!" And they started slapping each other. Pia, pia, pia. And they started fighting. That's why you can see eclipse of sun or moon. When the moon got angry, the moon went to the sun and slapped the sun, and they started fighting. When the sun got angry, he went to the moon and slapped her, and they started fighting. That's the origin of eclipse of sun or moon. Ladies and gents, in our country Benin, or in Africa, when you finish a story, you derive from this story some pieces of advice, lessons from this story. 1, never trust in friends. 2nd, greediness is a disease. And the next one, never kill somebody, never kill people for anything. Thank you for holding on. Story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story, story, story okuo, story. Hey, Cleo Maria, Cleo, Cleo, Cleo Maria, Cleo, oh hobby, Cleo Maria, Cleo, Cleo, Cleo Maria, Cleo.
Hello.
Hello everyone, my name is Rashida Sadiq, and the title of my story is The Singing Drum. Once upon a time, there was a young boy called Atilola. Atilola means we have found wealth in the Yoruba language, and his parents really treated him as a wonderful source of wealth. He was cherished, he was loved as a child that had been waited for so long and had finally come. He was the only child, and his parents doted over him continuously. He almost always had whatever he wanted. One day, he called to his mom that he wanted to go out to play, but the clouds were dark and rumbling, and his mom said to him, "Atilola, don't go out. The weather isn't so good." And he started to mumble and grumble, and he started to wail and weep. And his mom said, okay, you can go, but be very careful. Whenever you see that it starts to rain, you must come back home immediately. He was so happy, he rushed out and he went to meet his friends.
He and his friends gathered at the edge of the forest to look for some honey. They searched and searched and searched, and they didn't really find any. Atilola encouraged them to move deeper into the forest to look for sweet, delicious honey. Well, they were adventurous boys, so they went along with him. But when they heard the lightning and the thunder, some of them got afraid and said they'd like to go back. Atilola said, "I'm not afraid of a little lightning and thunder. We have to find the honey." A few boys left and a few boys stayed behind. When it started drizzling, a few of the other boys also said they would go back home because they didn't want to get wet and get their parents upset. But Atilola was very determined. He wasn't going to go back home. He wanted the honey. So he allowed the boys to go, and he kept on searching for honey. All of a sudden, the rain became so heavy he couldn't even see much, so he decided to find somewhere to hide. He didn't really find anywhere suitable, but there was a huge tree that had some shade. So he crouched by the tree and waited, and the rain fell heavier and heavier and heavier. And suddenly, there was a flood, and the flood washed Atilola away. Oh no! He started to scream frantically for help! 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 There was no one around to help him. All of a sudden, on the top of a hill, he saw a little hut. So he started to scream louder than ever before. "Help me! Please help me!" And out crawled Mr. Tortoise, known as Ijakpa in the Yoruba language. And everyone knows Ijakpa to be very wise and very cunning. Ijakpa held out a stick for Atilola, and Atilola held on for dear life while Ijakpa pulled him up to safety. They climbed up on the rock, entered into the hut. Ijakpa lit a fire, and Atilola got warm and cozy, and he gave Atilola a little bit to eat. While Atilola lay down, he started to miss home, and he remembered a lullaby that his mom sang to him regularly, and he started to sing it to himself. Ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà, ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà, kékeré jòjò ló máa bí tèmi. Ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà, bọ́mọ mi bá dàgbà aṣoríire. Ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà, bọ́mọ mi bá dàgbà adọ́lọ́lá. Ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà, ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà, ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà, kékeré jòjò ló máa gbé tèmi. Ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà. And he sang until he slept off. But Ijakpa was so enthralled by the beauty of his voice and the sonorous nature of the song. And then he came up with a cunning idea. He went out and he found a big piece of wood and he carved a huge drum. The next morning, he asked Atilola to enter the drum. And Atilola said, "Why? Why should I enter a drum?" He said, "Well, I saved your life. The least you can do for me is obey me. Enter the drum and we'll go around, you'll sing your beautiful song, and people will pay us for the entertainment." Well, Atilola didn't really have a choice. So he entered the drum, and the tortoise covered the drum with a hide. And he decided to carry the drum from village to village. At every village, he would stop at the square and start to hit the drum. And the drum, of course, would start to sing with Atilola inside. Ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà, ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà, kékeré jòjò ló máa gbé tèmi. Ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà. People loved the sound of the song, and they thought it was a magic singing drum, and they would pay the tortoise a lot of money. And he did this, moving from village to village and town to town. One day, the king at Atilola's village heard about the beautiful singing drum, and he asked Ijakpa to come to their town and drum and sing for them. So Ijakpa was very happy that the king had finally recognized him. He took the drum and they went to the town square. He started to beat the drum, and of course Atilola started to sing as usual. Ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà, ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà, kékeré jòjò ló máa gbé tèmi. Ọmọ o ìpẹ́ dàgbà. The king was also enchanted by the beautiful song, but someone far off started to wail, "That's my son! That's Atilola! That's his voice! I know his voice anywhere!" Well, there was pandemonium. Everybody was surprised. And she came to the king, begging and insisting that her son was the one singing, that it wasn't a magic drum. Well, the king ordered Ijakba to open up the drum. And yes, inside it, they found Atilola. He was so happy to see his mom, and his mom and dad were so happy to see him. And he promised and he begged that, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm never going to disobey you ever again, mother. I'm so sorry." Well, the king thought of what befitting punishment to give Ijakba, and Ijakba said to him, "Ah, your majesty, I saved his life. I think I should be rewarded." So when the king heard that, he decided not to punish Ijakba, but he banished him from their town forever. The end.
Wow, another wonderful story. Thank you very much, Rashidat, for your story. We are, as you can see, we've been here for 2 hours already, and we still have people listening. This was not just a webinar. It is indeed a festival, as David said at the beginning. But I just wanted to use this opportunity to ask a few questions to our panelists here, Rashida, Geraldine, Mwanaidi, who are here. Jack can't be with us, Sikombozo as well. And after this, just 2 questions, and after which we would invite 2 members of the audience who want to share a story to share their stories with us, and that will take us smoothly to the end. We already have a story that will come from Uganda, and there's 1 more story. So if there's someone else from another country not represented in this panel, we've got Kenya, South Africa, Benin, Tanzania, and Nigeria. Have I forgotten any? We've got Cameroon, of course, because I'm here. And if there's anyone else from another culture, that would be great for us to listen to your story. So my question to Geraldine, Rashidat, Mwanaidi, is I've got 2 quick questions. What are your experiences? Just share with us your experiences on the CREST course that David led.
I start.
Yes.
My experience was a wonderful, amazing experience because I've never had such a course before since I left college. It was wonderful meeting with other people across the world, learning stories from other continents, like South America, North America, India, Pakistan, and in CREST, David introduced to us these personal stories because we were not aware that we have stories with us. So he made us realize that we have stories within ourselves. Thank you.
Rashidat?
Yes, thank you, Geraldine. I totally agree. It was really a lot of fun. And I think the most profound was meeting with people from other cultures. And not just the training, we have a community on Facebook. We normally have regular, at least quarterly. The thing I really loved about the CREST course was the fact that we had this project that we had to plan. And that, for me, was really the culmination of making it productive. You couldn't just do the course and then sit, because before you stop or before the course ends, you start to think of what you're going to do and how you're going to use the knowledge you've learned. It was awesome. Thank you.
Great. Mwanaidi, did you want to add anything? You are muted.
Okay, so if you can hear me,
yeah.
My experiences are very wonderful, as I used to tell stories before, but I must admit that having enrolled in this CREST course have sharpened my my ways of telling stories. Right now, I know how to, after telling a story, how to ask a student to respond creatively through different ways. And my techniques are so wonderful and they improved. So I can say that I improve a lot as a storyteller and a teacher.
Great, okay. My second question was more related to to your professional experience now. How would you say your teaching has been influenced by participating in this course, in the CREST course? Could we start with Geraldine, of course?
Yes. In my teaching, I now tell stories even more than before. Every lesson I go to in the language lesson, I come up with 3 minutes because David's stories, you give it in 3 minutes. So in 3 minutes, out of 35 minutes, 3 minutes is quite enough to tell a story very quickly and finish. So I use the stories more. I even share stories from other cultures, and it has helped me to pass a message through.
Right, okay.
And it is through stories that I was able to tell stories of the environment. And last year, we were one of the top 10 winners out of 200 schools in the world on climate change, Co-op 26, through stories. I asked children to tell stories on the story of my school, and they gave the stories. So this was through David's introduction to stories and how to engage children to tell stories.
Great, great. Yeah, any other response? Rashida, Monaidi, maybe we should go to Monaidi first.
Okay, thank you. So my experiences as a teacher, through stories, I learned how to differentiate my teaching or my instruction in the classroom. We know that we have students with diversity. So stories engage those students with low ability to learn. So it's engage them in a more way that they are laughing and enjoying while they are learning. So as a teacher, I see this as an improvement because I get to know my students more and more each day. Yeah.
Yeah. My last question, not to the panelists, but to you, David. How does this feedback from the participants in your course make you feel?
Oh, it's humbling. You know, I don't think of myself really as a teacher so much as a facilitator on my courses, and I learn as much as I teach, and I've learned so much. I mean, I just want to clarify one thing that came up earlier. You mentioned Geraldine as being a teacher who's done 2 courses with me. Also, Rashidat did a follow-up course with me, and both of you dived deeply. And like Rashidat said, it's a course where participants do projects according to their own interests, what they're thinking about the direction of travel in the future with storytelling, and to embrace that and to carry it forward and to be implementing it in your own teaching. And in both cases, I think in the cases of all of the people, I mean, including of course Jacques and Sikumbuzu, as well as the people who were present here, all of you are taking these ideas and sharing your knowledge as you are here today with colleagues in your countries, in your regions, and beyond borders, around Africa. Even, well, there's lots of people here who are outside of Africa as well. You're just inspiring us, and this is what it's all about. This is, and this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this crazy pandemic. But what a blessing has come from it. What a joy has come from this very difficult period for the world, that now it's even more possible than before to share stories in the present moment across the world. It's an incredible thing.
Thank you very much. And we can't thank you enough. Just to say that something we didn't mention initially is that there are also people, well-wishers, who donate to support the teachers that David takes on his course from Africa. So if you would like to donate for an African teacher to participate in the CREST course and to be able to use their stories in a more productive way in the language classroom, please do get in touch with David directly, or with me or Africa ELTA, and then we would link you up with David so you can discuss ways in which you could contribute, you could donate to supporting African teachers to be part of the CREST course. Thank you so much, David, and I hope that we're going to get more and more African teachers joining the course in the next sessions. This is the time now. Thank you. This is the time for us to open up to two members of the audience. We already have our Darlene Atrebembire from Uganda. She's joining us from the US. She's actually on a scholarship studying in the US now, but she's a strong force behind ELTA, the Ugandan Teachers Association, and she's happy to share a story. We also have Anita's hand up. Anita, have you raised your hand because you want to tell a story? Please, can you just put that in the chat box so we know you want to tell a story and we can bring you in to the panel room. So yeah, oh yeah, Anita is in. Can you now drop your hand? You've got a legacy hand. So over to you, Darlene. Unmute yourself, please.
Sorry. My name is Darlene. I am from ELTA. I will tell a famous story from my country, from Buganda. I teach in high school, so I use stories to teach writing because I teach composition writing. So oftentimes when I tell a story, or I let them tell stories, sometimes I let them put themselves in the shoes of the characters and tell them to write what they would have done if they were the characters. Yes, so we have a story of Walkaga, the blacksmith. It's from central Uganda in Uganda. Once long ago, there lived a man called Walkaga, and he was a famous blacksmith. Farmers and housewives trusted him to make for them all the household things they would use, including knives. We still have such knives in Uganda. We use them for harvesting, pangas, hoes, and all other things. And then there lived a king, the king of Uganda. He was the most cruel king the kingdom had ever seen. He made everyone live in fear because he wanted to be respected like a small god. So one day, Walkaga was summoned to the palace. The king wanted something, and Walkaga was scared. His wife and the kids were scared too, because once you were summoned by the king, it either meant favors or death, and one of the two could have happened to Walkaga. So he went to the palace, prostrated before the king who was seated with his chiefs. And then the king said, Walkaga, you're known as a famous blacksmith. I have a task for you. And then Walkaga listened. The task was that one of the king's sons had been attacked by an elephant, mauled, and one of his arms was off. Like the elephant had mauled off one of his arms. So the king wanted Walkaga to make a human arm because he was a blacksmith. So Walkaga was worried. Saying no would have meant losing his head. He accepted the task anyway and went home. He didn't sleep the entire night. So he was thinking of what he could do to save his head. By morning, he had come up with an idea. So he made an arm out of iron that he took to the king's son. And he was lucky enough that the king's son was happy about the new arm. So the king was happy and rewarded him with 20 cows. So Walkaga went home happy, thinking that he had saved his head. But alas, after a week, the king called Walkaga again. This time round, his wife had been taken by a crocodile. She almost lost her life, but one of the king's wives saved her. So she had lost a leg. So Walkaga was to make a leg this time round. He had done it before, so he went ahead and made a leg for the king's wife, and still he was rewarded. But the third task was a hard one. After like a week, the king summoned Walkaga once again. And this time around, he said, if you can make a leg and an arm, so you can make a human. Walkaga, I'm tasking you, because you're a great blacksmith, to make a human who can breathe. If you don't do it, you lose your head. Everyone was scared, including the chiefs that were seated with the king, because they knew Walkaga was going to lose his head. And the countrymen, these fellow Baganda, they were scared because they were going to lose their famous blacksmith. So Walkaga went home. He had a scowl on his face, and he was really scared. As he sat around his hut thinking of what to do, a renowned Bogere man called Bogere, and he was a madman around the village, came and asked him, Walkaga, why are you worried? I've never seen you this worried. You're known throughout the villages as the great blacksmith. Why do you have a scowl on your face? And then Walkaga replied, he wouldn't have replied under normal circumstances, but he was going to die anyway. Why not converse with a madman? So he told him that the king had given him such a huge task to make a human being out of iron, and the human should breathe. So the madman sat and thought and told him, hey, I have a solution for you. And Walkaga listened. Did he have a solution anyway, apart from listening to the madman? So the madman told him, go and tell the king and ask him for two things. You will need around 10 pots of tears, human tears, to make the man. And then you will need 10 sacks of ashes of human hair. If he gives you those things, then you can make a human. Then Walkaga was happy. He thought it would work because he didn't think the king would get those things. Walkaga went back to the palace. The king was unhappy because he didn't have the human. But then Walkaga told him, I have some things I will need to make you human. If you give them to me, I'll make the human that you tasked me to make. So the king listened, and Walkaga put his conditions. He will need 10 pots of human tears, and then he will need 10 sacks of ash of human hair. Not human hair, but the ash of human hair. So the king sent sentries throughout the kingdom. The sentries were to make sure that people cry until they feel 10 pots of tears, and then they should shave off every Muganda until they get ash from hair that can fill 10 sacks for Walkaga to make a human. So they made people cry. People were beaten and they were abused in any kind of form. It is told that some women would lean or bend for the smoke from the fire to get into their eyes, and they cry. But they didn't make even one single container of tears. Neither did they get enough ash to even fill a small jug. So they came back to the king after a month and told him, unfortunately, we couldn't get the things that you sent for. So the king was very annoyed. But then he called Walkaga once again, summoned him to the palace, and told him that you asked me for what is impossible because I asked you for what is impossible. So I think you should not make a human because that is impossible. So the moral of the story is that you shouldn't ask for too much from people because they will ask for too much from you. That is the end of the story.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, and thanks for sharing your story with us. Have we got another person who wants to tell a story?
Can I say something very quickly, Harry?
Yes,
that was amazingly well told, Alan. And last year I did a project, and Harry was part of the project, called Around the World in 88 Tales. And one of the participants was a wonderful storyteller called Philippa Kabali Kagwa, who comes from Uganda. She lives in South Africa, and she told the same story.
Really?
I loved hearing the story again. I've just put a link in the chat, and people can enjoy listening to Dalen's version and also Philippa's version. Both of you told it so beautifully. And there's also interesting differences because, of course, with these traditional stories, there are variants of the same story, maybe told in different regions or in different communities within the same culture. It's very, very interesting. Beautiful.
You have several versions. Yeah.
Wow. Right. Okay. We are getting very close to the end of our Festival of African Stories and Ideas for Stories in the Classroom. In the absence of any other speaker, I would like to tell a story of Wandong. I would want to tell the story about Bankambong and his moon maiden. In the olden days when the world was still a wonderful place to live in, a peaceful place where people loved one another, where communities communed with one another, there lived a man called Bankambong, right in the heart of the Watio kingdom in Agem, somewhere in the northwest of Cameroon. He was such a lovely man. He loved his wife and his family, and he was so devoted to his family that he became the envy of every woman in the village. In those days, the moon was disappointed with the men she had come in contact with. She didn't trust that there was any man in the world who was good enough to be her husband. But something deep in her heart told her that somewhere in the world, there will be in a place a man who is worthy of her heart. So the moon started going round the earth, looking for a man of her heart. She moved from the north to the west, from the west to the south, from the south to the southeast, to the east, and from the east back to the north, but she didn't find a man. And then she started crisscrossing the earth, looking for the man of her dream. And then one night, as she was touring the world, looking for a man she could love, she heard a voice singing in the middle of the night. Oh, misi moza konyambo ko owowo wunkom ton kenyando ton wonowa nsunu moton yelo wesita samo oh wulo no mwangalo oh wulo no mwangalo misi moza konyambo ko owowo wunkom ton kenyando ton wonowa. And so she tiptoed towards that voice because she loved the music. And then looking down into the earth, she saw a man splitting firewood with a baby on his back, singing this beautiful song. Oh, Nisi moja kwenye mboko owo. Won kom tong kwenye ndu tonga wanua. Nfunu tong elo wetu tera samo. Oh, ulonu wangali. So she looked at this man in the middle of the night, splitting firewood with the baby on his back. And she fell in love with Bankambong. So the moon came down straight into the earth and captured and embraced Bankambong and took him up with her to the moon, where they lived happily forever. So my dear friends, when you ask scientists about the shadows in the moon, they tell you about lakes and craters casting shadows. Don't believe them. Those shadows in the moon are Bankambong with his baby on his back, splitting firewood for his maiden, the moon. Thank you. So I think we've come to the end of our session. There were lots of very interesting questions in the chat box, but unfortunately we cannot respond to those questions. We would like to invite all of you to watch out for our open educational resources, because these colleagues here would be sharing resources. They would be sharing their own resources from the stories that they've just told us. And it would be an opportunity for you as well to share your resources with Africa ELTA. Do follow us. You can become a member of Africa ELTA. It's free. Our membership is free. I think our president, Amira Salama, did share the link to the application to become a member. So please do join us. It's free of charge, and you would be part of our WhatsApp group, our Telegram group, and also our email system, so we can send you information. But we would also want to encourage you to contribute to your resources, lesson plans, and ideas for lessons using stories or any other types of lessons that you want to share with African teachers and with teachers around the world, because our resources are very open to everyone around the world. That's a special mark of African solidarity, that we connect with the rest of the universe. We don't divide the world. We want to unite the world by sharing the wonderful stories and the wonderful expertise that we have around the world. And working with people like you, David, has been such an inspiration for us and for our teachers. Thank you very much, David. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you to everyone else who has joined us.